order. We're going to be missing two of our board members. Ms. Castle, her flight, she couldn't find another flight, and Ms. Reed is out of the country. And Mr. Costa should be here. So we're going to get moving. Gippin?
Present.
Peoples?
Present.
Lewis?
Present.
Richards?
Present.
Costa?
Present.
Anaskevich?
Present.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, we will approve last meeting's minutes. Anybody have anything to review?
Move approval.
I get a second?
Second.
All right. Roll call, Anaskevich? Yes, for approval. No, you're all right. Gippin?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Right. Moving, next item on our agenda. This will be led by Ms. Anaskevich as far as our public comment. Each person will have a total of 3 minutes to make public comment. So, Ms. Anaskevich, I'll turn it over to you.
We first have Pastor Gregory Harrison. For Mr. Harrod, Pastor, thank you for coming. You have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. I won't bore you with reading my statement. I emailed the statement to Mr. Phil Young. And my immediate issue is Mr. Boyd, Kemp Boyd, as I stated in City Council. I don't believe that people who receive money from the city should serve on this board. I think that that is a conflict. I know a conflict of interest is a legal term, but I think that that is something that needs to be addressed. So that's in my letter. But I want to also say that there has been a lot of work done in the area of criminal justice reform. There was a racial equity task force, and there were over, I would say, 1,000 hours spent coming up with recommendations. And I think that would be a great place to start. And I would say it was a challenge. The Racial Equity Task Force was a challenge. It was a challenge getting information. It was a challenge getting cooperation from the city. And I'm saying the city because it was a city representative, so I'm saying the city as a whole. But it was a challenge, and this board has been 25 plus years coming. And I think that we owe it to the citizens to be transparent. We owe it to the citizens to be diligent in everything we do. And it really should not come down to a person or a personal issue of integrity. It is the integrity of the board. And the citizens deserve to be comfortable and confident. I want to read something because sometimes, somehow religion is coming into this. And I want to read, and I would invite you to read the entirety of Amos, but Amos 5:21 through 24. I hate and reject your festivals. I don't enjoy your joyous assemblies. If you bring me your entirety of burnt offerings and gift of food, I won't be pleased. I won't even look at your offerings of well-fed animals. Take away the noise of your songs. I won't listen to the melody of your harps. But let justice roll down like waters and righteous like an ever-flowing stream. And that's what we seek, is justice. And what does justice look like? I think this board will help to define that in this city. But it must be done transparent and open and free of conflicts or potential conflicts. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would it be appropriate for me to ask Pastor a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Pastor, I'm Bob Gibbon. I think we've met in one of the board members. taking what you said at face value, is it your contention that council was unaware of whatever business Pastor Kent does with the city when it approved his appointment to this board?
I don't know that. When I found out, I got a call Monday, and I came to city council Monday evening. Now, if council was aware or not, and you'll see in the letter, I'm just asking you to say if it's a conflict or not. If council is aware, they're aware. If council says there's not a conflict, there's not a conflict, as far as they're concerned. But my contention is, it is. That's me. Okay, so when I was
What I'm hearing you say, Pastor, is that you have no knowledge one way or the other that council was unaware of the city's relationship with Pastor Boyd when it approved him. Is that the situation?
I would say, when I found out, I came to council. Now, you would have to ask, please don't turn away from me.
I'm sorry, sir. I get what you're saying.
So if you're asking if council knew or not, I think that would be better directed towards council. They may have. And in my letter, I'm just saying, if this board would say one way or another, or council will say one way or another. So if they knew, I don't know.
Thank you, Pastor Harrison. Reverend John Beatty, please.
Thank you, members of this very important board. One thing I want to thank you for is putting the public comment at the beginning of your meeting rather than at the end, often after business is already done in City Council. My concern is also justice. I truly believe that God's love, when it's made public, comes out as justice. And I believe that we have very much injustice in our city. And I believe that the reason why we had such a outpouring of voting by the citizens of Akron, because of another sense that there is injustice in this city. My concern is that if this board is going to be effective, the board has to be independent of the powers in the city that can cause injustice. And I know that the city administration and the police department and the Federation of Police in Akron did not want you to exist. Did not want you to exist. That's why after the motion was made, was in process of the citizens having an independent citizens review board of the police in order to bring transparency and justice in terms of the relationship between citizens and the police department in particular, but in general, the city administration. There has to be independence. My request is that each of you, including you, Reverend Boyd, indicate publicly what funds you are getting from the city administration that did not want you to exist. Because if the city administration did not want you to exist, if the police department did not want anything outside of the police department that it had to be accountable to, in other words, did not want the city the police department to be accountable to the citizens of this city. If all of these power structures did not want you to exist, they're not going to, now that you do exist, they're not going to stop trying to make you dependent on the powers that be. And what you receive from the city that did not want you to exist, what you receive monetarily should be known by the citizens who made it possible for you to exist. That's my request. Let us know what you are receiving from the city. But as that person from the FBI, when Watergate was going on, said, follow the money. Who is paying you? And what effect will that be on the independence of this board? And if you're not independent of the city that does not want you to exist, then you are like so many other citizen review boards that have proved to be toothless. It is so difficult for you to remain independent. And I hope that you will be very transparent. Let us know as citizens what you are receiving from the city. And then we can understand whether you are going to be independent or whether you're going to be dependent upon the hands that feed you.
Thank you,
Thank
Pastor
you.
Beatty.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all of our public comments. We truly do appreciate your time and your efforts to be present and to be here with us on this evening. Next item on our agenda will be our independent police auditor report. Mr. Young.
Good evening, everyone. Last week, you know that I wasn't here, but I was still working even though I wasn't here. We had quite a few complaints last week. I actually had 4 on Monday, 3 on Tuesday, and 1 on Wednesday, and I'm still working on those. I'd like to go back a couple of weeks ago. Mrs. Jackson was here during public comment and talked about a complaint that she had filed with me, if everyone remembers that. I was finally able to pull the body camera footage on this incident, and believe it or not, I think I counted 19 different body cameras, all each about an hour long. So I'm going to have 19 or 20 hours of body camera. I've been trying to get more information on what happened, why this stop occurred, and it's very, very sketchy on exactly what this is all about, other than she was a protester. There was some concern that protesters were being asked to do something different in filing complaints. I talked to Deputy Chief Harding about it, and I also talked to Chief Millette about, you know, we're not going to change in midstream. We've been accepting emails, and that shouldn't change, and if it does change, we need to know about it. And he said that, you know, that process had not changed. So if any of you get any wind or word that protesters are being asked to do something different to file a complaint, please let me know. Thank you.
Okay.
One more thing, I just sent a copy of Pastor Harrison's letter to everyone. Did you get it? I just sent you an email. All right, good.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Young? Right. Move into the next item on our agenda, item 5, beginning with our Thank you. Beginning with our subcommittee report outs, I'll start first with,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I did have a question for Mr. Young, we had spoken on the phone, and you said maybe next week and the week after you would be willing to give us that training that we had asked for before you fell ill?
I hope so. I'm struggling right now.
Okay.
I brought in a copy of, hopefully everyone got a copy.
Yes, I have that.
Of the citizen complaint. This is the same format that we had for the use of force, but there's two different things. I would like to touch on one thing, since you said that even before the training next week. In all the training we had over at the Dan Street Training Center, do all of you remember representatives from the police department saying that out of 150,000 calls for service, we only had 45 complaints?
Yes.
Does everyone remember that? The reason I hadn't released this is I've been trying to figure out where those other complaints went, because I know we had more than 45 because I gave them 47. And some of the things that I learned was that there were some complaints that weren't in. So let me put it this way. The correct verbiage should not have been out of 150,000 calls for service, we only had 45 complaints. I think the correct verbiage should be out of 150,000 calls for service, we only investigated 45 complaints. There were complaints that weren't investigated, and there were other complaints. I took 2 through my office that never showed up as complaints because they went through internal affairs, and there was at least 10 investigations through internal affairs. And when I asked where are those numbers going to show up, they said we're still working on where we'd like to put those. So they haven't made a decision on how they're going to log those 10. And then there were, I think, probably at least another 20 or 30 that weren't investigated.
Thank you.
any other questions, discussions for Mr. Young? All right, we'll move on to our subcommittee report out, starting with Mr. Gippen and governance.
You want that first?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
The committee met yesterday. Really the only item of business was the matter of bringing the, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Do I need to restart? We met yesterday. The only real item of business was consideration of alternative resolutions that have been presented to the board today as a mechanism for determining the extent of the board's authority. So I hope that all of the members received the memorandum and draft today, and I do have hard copies, Mr. Chair, if it'd be appropriate to provide those to the public that's in attendance. Without reading the memorandum, I trust everybody's had an opportunity to do it. The intention is by this resolution for the board to make a determination between what clearly has emerged as an issue as to whether the board is empowered to investigate citizen complaints, public complaints, or on its own initiative, police conduct at any time, regardless of whether there is simultaneously pending a police department investigation, or whether the powers of the board are limited to review of police department investigations after they have taken place, for the purpose of, determining whether those investigations were, in essence, full, complete, and fair, and so on. But that review function is more than essentially, my understanding of it, it is what Mr. Young has done up to this point, but it would be done with the involvement of the board, with whatever additional staff, but that it would not differ in substance from what Mr. Young has done now, versus doing investigations whenever we believe they should be made. That same issue pertains then to the extent of our information gathering power, whether it is so broad that it encompasses its use at any time for our investigative purposes, or whether it is limited to the review function that I've described. The way this is, we thought best to address this was by offering you what amounts to 2 variations of a resolution. The whereas clauses are all the same, setting out the issue and the basis for the existence of the issue. And then you have what we've called an alternative A, which would be determining that the board has relatively less authority, that is, only the review authority comparable to what Mr. Young has done to this point. An alternative B, which would be determining that the board has relatively more authority, both as to investigation and getting information. In other words, going beyond what Mr. Young does now. As the law department has seen these drafts, but made no comment other than we were not obligated to adopt this. It could just be done in the rules, but there was no comment concerning the text itself, much less which alternative the law department might advise be adopted or not. So we hope that the language that's here meets its purpose, which is to put the issue before the board in a way in which it can be properly determined one way or the other, okay, without any recommendation as to which resolution should be adopted. As I indicated in my covering memorandum to you, which hopefully explained this a bit better, I'm going to move adoption of what is alternative B, that is the alternative that finding that we would have more authority. I do so for the purpose of putting the matter on the table for discussion, and I want to make it clear I have not determined what my own vote on the motion would be, but that procedurally I think is the correct way to put the matter before the board. So, Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Is there a second?
Question. Mr. Gippen, the law director sent out an email at 4:27 this afternoon. Did you see that?
Yeah, hold on, Ms. Young, we're gonna get there. Just hold on 1 second. You got a second? Okay.
Second.
What we're gonna do, just because we're missing 2 of our members, we're gonna table this
Yes.
until next week. And probably going to Mr. Young's point, the law department did reach out to us, so the plan is to table this for next week when we have our other 2 board members here. and then also possibly go into executive session. That way we can hear from the law department regarding some of the language and some of the verbiage into this. I don't disagree. I agree, Mr. Gippin. I'd rather for this board to have more power and not need to use it versus not having it and needing it. And so, go ahead.
Well, again, I'm not, we've discussed privately what our views may be, but I am genuinely keeping myself open as to how ultimately I would vote on these. You know, I too, I will not be here next week, Mr. Chair. My wife and I are out of town. I probably can have a discussion with the law director myself.
Okay.
To get, if that's appropriate, but I will not be here next week.
Okay. And I think it's, Mr. Gippin, I think it's appropriate, especially being the chair of our governance, if you wouldn't mind meeting with the law department, I think that's completely fine.
Mr. Chair, so do you need, I'll move to table the motion.
Okay.
As well.
Thank you.
Well, I still had a comment about it, if I may. First, I want to thank you, Mr. Gippin, for putting this piece together. I feel like after weeks of trying to put this board together with all the talent that we have on this board, I feel that we're finally getting to the meat and potatoes as to why we were seated in the first place to be here, which is for the citizens of Akron who voted for us to be here. And finally, we have something, a document, a legal document with changes that will help us engage with the city more effectively, our citizens more effectively regarding their complaints with the police department, and hopefully that we can engage with the police department more effectively because of this resolution that you've written. So I personally want to thank you for putting your hard work into this document.
Well, thank you, but we're all working very hard, and this is, I think, what we undertook. I was happy enough to do it.
Just a point, Mr. Gibbons won't be here and Ms. Reed will not be here, so we'll be in the same predicament next week. Do we have a quorum here to decide?
We can move to the 31st, the following week, after next. Oh.
Is it? No.
Yes, so Ms. Costa.
Yeah, I'm just a bit torn on this process, to be completely honest. I think that I want to echo Ms. Anaskevich comments in terms of thank you for taking the time to lead through this process, Mr. Gippin. I think that we should be a little bit more formal in terms of our request to the law department in terms of understanding what their position is. While I can appreciate the fact that we have a number of attorneys on this board, at the end of the day, the law department is a designated counsel for us and is here to assist us. And after having a little bit of a conversation with some folks in the law department earlier today, I don't believe that I don't believe that there's a lack of insider input. I think that there is just a degree of caution. And so I would love for us to actually invite the law department in here to have, I would prefer a public conversation, because we are the Citizens Review Board and we've got citizens that should be privy to having the insight that the law department provides to us. I don't want to take for granted anyone here's ability to understand or analyze the legal text as well too, because I think that their interpretations to us could be helpful regardless of if we agree or not. So while I would love for the governance committee to meet with the law department, I think that us having a public conversation with them and requesting a formal opinion would be incredibly helpful. And I am not close to the option of us then seeking an independent legal opinion as well too as we move forward. So those are just some thoughts here. And again, thank you for the work.
Well, you helped too, Mr. Costa. Mr. Chairman. I have no problem, in fact, it would be my preference to, I think it's appropriate, to formally request the written advice of the law department as to basically which choice, or if they think that the resolutions ought to be rephrased to better state the positions, that's fine, but I think we should formally seek their advice in writing and receive it, and as a public matter, not a privileged matter. Whether the law department should, speak to the board publicly or in executive session, I guess I don't really have a view. I think whatever is preferable. I can predict the law department will be very uncomfortable with giving the advice in public. But I don't disagree that if the board would rather have that advice provided publicly, I see no reason not to receive it. And whether I'm here or not, I can always listen to the tape. But I do think we ultimately should seek a formal advice of the law department, whether or not we seek other advice. So I guess I'm a long way of saying I don't disagree, but there may be some issues with open session with them.
I have a couple comments. One, I do agree that we should table it until all board members are present. Two, I agree with Mr. Costa that we should at least invite the law department to come and speak publicly. It will be up to them. If they want to refuse to do that publicly, then we can go to Plan B, executive session or whatever. But I think they should at least be invited for the spirit, in the spirit of transparency. You know, we've had a citizen get up here just tonight and speak about transparency. So I think it's the law department's decision if they don't want to do it publicly, and then we'll go to Plan B. But I totally agree with Mr. Costa's review of this, how this should go.
Any further discussion? All right, we'll table this.
I think you need a vote on the motion, Mr. Chair. You need a vote on the motion to table.
Anaskevich,
Yes.
Gibbon,
Sorry, yes.
Yes.
Peoples,
Yes.
Lewis,
No.
Richards,
Yes.
Costa,
Yes.
Boyd, yes. Is that all from governance?
Yes, just in terms of the next meeting, we will meet, I'll put out a notice about it. We will meet at 5:30 next Tuesday. I will again seek a library branch. I'm going to, in sort of order, which is what I tried this week, Maple Valley, North Hill, and if those aren't available, I'll just sort of play it by ear, but the intention is to meet again at a library branch, but it'll be at 5:30 because, as Mr. Costa is going to explain, his committee is going to meet at this, whatever location that is at 5, but it'll be 5:30 at a branch library.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon, for your report. We'll move on to the Human Resources Subcommittee, and Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Chair. I guess first I have a logistic questions for everyone. We have 4 members of our committee. Only 2 were able to come to the committee meeting. Do we need a quorum to vote or present anything to the board? Anyone have an opinion about that?
Oh. I imagine you did have, didn't have a majority.
No.
Well, I don't necessarily think we need a quorum, because most anything that you're going to recommend is going to come to the board, and we'll vote for it here. And it depends on, because you're always going to have, yeah, I would say no, but I will get back to you as well.
So is your question, Beverly, that what we discussed, you and I discussed yesterday, is not, for lack of a better term, a legitimate discussion because we didn't have a quorum for the subcommittee?
Well, we technically didn't vote on anything. You know, I
Right.
presented the functions thing that we're going to present to the board, but So as many as we can get together, and then we'll present what we did to the board. Is that what your thoughts are? Take minutes on it and,
Ms. Richard, my feeling is that it's entirely proper for this to be brought before us. Really, because it is just a recommendation. It wasn't any binding action, and no reason not to consider it, I would say.
right, and I don't think actually when you put it that way, no subcommittee actually takes action. They just make decisions and present what they decide is best to the board, so.
At least for this, for now, yes.
Okay. All right, so the first thing we have to present then is our HR Subcommittee Functions document. I believe you should have all got that. I apologize, you do not have copies for the public tonight. And I know it's semi in line with the format that Mr. Gippen gave, but not totally. I didn't know if anyone had any comments about it, or questions or arguments.
Mr. Chairman? I did have some questions. I would have, my question is, there's nothing stated about hiring, and I wonder if it wouldn't be appropriate for the subcommittee to include in its objectives, I don't know how to phrase it quite, but initial work, initial review, to fill positions, and the making of recommendations concerning hiring to the board. I mean, what I've understood is that you're doing now, but should that not be expressed as a function of the board, of the committee, to be doing that as to hiring?
Yep, I'm putting it in.
The other question I had was, I didn't understand the amendment part. Two-thirds vote and so on, I mean, that I did not understand.
I was making the objectives different. That if we wanted to change the objectives, then the board would approve that as a whole.
Would that not be, could that not be better be by simple majority of the board?
Sure.
And I suppose you mean the functions rather than the charter, right?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Well, if a majority doesn't agree, then you have to have a backup. Two-thirds vote. We're not going to always agree on everything.
If you don't have the majority, then the change just doesn't come through.
Okay.
It will remain as is.
Okay.
Right.
I'm not a lawyer, so I don't. Thank you for clarifying that. So.
I've made those additions, and I'll resend it out, and maybe for final approval next week. Does that work?
Thank you.
And then we had lengthy discussions about the points that I put. Concern over general oversight of the police auditor position. Everything from signing off on Mr. Young's time to general management of that position, helping him with boundaries and communication and how we want that to occur. I had the auditor's job description to go over, but I thought we were a little premature in doing that until we figured out what our intentions were, how we wanted to interact, how we wanted Mr. Young to interact with us. So as we have become responsible for a city employee and potentially 3 city employees, I don't want to take it lightly that there's a lot of things we need to get right about that. And that it will be time-consuming, that we need to figure out how to move forward with that in a thoughtful and respectful way, both for ourselves as a board and for Mr. Young and the people who will be working for him. And I guess I had different thoughts about it. I don't know if this is where maybe a contract worker comes in as almost like a liaison between the department and the board, or if, and I have no idea, even if this is wise or ethical, but if a board member could assume additional responsibilities for reimbursement to do that, because I do believe it's going to take a significant, especially at the beginning, a significant amount of time. I don't even know if that's a thing or if that makes sense. I didn't know if there was another city employee position that could help us with that. Just throwing it out for discussion. I just see it as requiring more time than a volunteer board would generally have to give. And I want to do it well and right, because this is the key to, I believe, our effectiveness is what the police auditor does.
So if I'm hearing correctly, you're suggesting that we may take on or need to take on a more formal review of the auditor's position as it relates to the functions currently being carried out, and looking to, I guess, similar organizations, or more so as it fits within the context of the municipality as a whole. I guess I'm trying to figure out what.
Both and.
Okay.
You know, Mr. Young is our sole employee at the moment, but we need to make an evaluation of him. We need to, you know, he's been very independent from all I can tell, for good or bad, right? And now we have been charged with that oversight. And but I know I don't personally have a great handle, and I don't think in our training from him is going to get us what we need in the day-to-day of his work life. Does that make sense? Nothing, I'm not degrading what you have done or what you're doing. I'm just saying we now are in charge of a city department, basically, and we need to do that well.
I have something to say about that. Mr. Young has been here, how many years, 15 years, whatever? Okay, so to now expect a brand-new board that, according to, you know, some people at the law department who like to emphasize we're voluntary, you know, to ask us now to supervise a police auditor who's been doing this for 15 years, who, in my mind's eye, we do need training from him as far as how he handles his complaints and that type of thing, because his complaints, as he handles them, and they go to the police department, and then they go back through him, and then they come to us, we have to have some idea on what that succession is like. So we do have to have training from him. But where I'm having problems is, to be frank, we didn't hire Mr. Young. We do not sign his paychecks, nor will we be signing his paychecks. And in my mind's eye, we don't have the authority to fire him for any reason or get rid of him. Not saying anybody's looking at that, but I'm just saying, and I like to personally, and this is, I'm making nice statements here, I like to think of him as working with us, and that he's not our quote-unquote employee, because we did not hire him. We don't know, you know, signing off on his approving vacation times and all that kind of stuff. And maybe this is the way it works with the board, but we're a brand new board coming into independent board, I emphasize, coming into this realm, and now we're being asked to supervise a city employee that's been here for 15 years and supervise him like he's our employee, like we know all the ins and outs about his employment, and we don't know that. And that's where I'm having difficulty, because we don't know that.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Understanding and not entirely disagreeing with what Ms. Anichevich has said, but under the charter, Mr. Young is our employee. And we do have responsibilities concerning him, including if the standards that are set out in the charter are met to discharge him. So given this, the difficulties are entirely what Ms. Richards has said and what you have said, but the fact is he is our employee, and that's just the reality of it.
I understand what the charter says, but we're already looking at changing some language in the charter.
No, we're not going to change any
The
language in
resolution
the
that you
charter.
gave, that's
We don't
not-
change any
no.
language in the charter.
It changes nothing in the
Well,
charter, right?
I don't, well, then I'm going to say I have problems with it. I have problems with us now having an employee that we didn't hire. I have problems with it. And I know, so the charter is the charter, but I don't know who wrote that or why, but who was his supervisor before we came along?
Gert Weems.
I've been in my position about 18 months. And Phil, I don't know when the switch was made, probably 2 or 3 months into that, so probably about a year or more, Phil has been under my supervision. So in Workday, which I hope everybody's had a chance to get set up on, when he signs off or takes time off, I'm the one who approves that. I want to recognize this board's independence and am asking, who does Phil now report to? Who is going to assume that responsibility? And I agree with Mr. Gippens' read of all of this. Per the charter, that is the course of action.
Okay, and I respect that, but I guess what I'm saying is, you're a salaried employee for the city of Akron who was responsible for signing off on his, in his workday, but now you're asking unsalaried independent board members to do that work.
And at the end of the day, this is a charter amendment, and that leads everything that we do at the city of Akron. It is our guiding document. And in that document, this structure has been set up.
If I may, we have an obligation to ensure that Auditor Young is both supported, but also has the guidance and able to do his role and carry it out in a productive way. And we absolutely have to abide by the charter, which sets out the standards to which it was my understanding that we had said that earlier, that Auditor Young would answer directly to the board chair and vice chair as needed. And I completely acknowledge the fact that there are some gaps in our capacity right now, but that won't necessarily be the case. And it's fairly common practice to inherit employees. So I don't think the manner in which Auditor Young's employment came underneath the board necessarily needs to influence the way that we supervise, which is, again, an obligation that we have to do. And so getting back to, I guess, the cruxes of this conversation, I think it would behoove us to determine what type of city personnel might carry out a function that provides standards of efficiency or best practices to the individual departments under the city. I don't know if that's from a budgetary standpoint or from a policy standpoint, but I can imagine that there has to be some type of entity working for the city of Akron that looks at the various departments on a case-by-case basis and is there to provide I guess some type of assessment of the functionality. Perhaps I'm thinking of the law department, but I think it's got to be a little bit more granular in terms of
An audit of the auditor.
Yeah, exactly. And perhaps that's something that we look externally for outside of the city of Akron. But I just want to get a sense of what practices or what functions are already available when there's audit of various departments within the city. Is that something that happens or is available?
And it is something we can absolutely take, if the board isn't requesting that, it is something we can definitely take a look at. I know Stacy Doty's been pretty helpful with just some basic HR questions, but it is a broader question and we could take a look at the board's direction with that.
I have a question. Is it possible that maybe we need to talk with the crafters of the charter. Is it possible when they wrote that the auditor will be our responsibility, be under our, under our guidance, is it possible that they were just connecting the two functions, because it makes sense if you say, well, a police auditor and the police review board should work in tandem with each other. Is it possible that that's what they meant by employee?
Ms. Anaskevich, I think the charter, I think the charter is the charter, and I know that we have met with the committee who actually wrote the charter. I want to say it was maybe a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And again, nobody is, at least not what I'm hearing, what Ms. Richards is saying is, she's not saying get rid of anybody. I think she's saying everything that has been said as far as how do we create, if you will, guardrails of procedures for the department. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is there's going to have to be, whether it's someone that we contract or it's whether it's going through, if the city has it, how do we audit a department just so we have an understanding of the efficiency and the effectiveness of the department, so that we can help to bring in for Mr. Young the efficiencies and the effectiveness that he needs to do the job that he needs to do. And that's not just looking at Mr. Young, but it's looking at, as a complaint is filed, what are some of the hangups on the other side within our police department that's causing anything to slow down or to not move as efficiently as it should.
Okay. Well,
And I don't want to speak for you, Ms. Richards, but that's what I'm hearing.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Question. This is for Gert Wims. She said she'd been my supervisor for the last year. Who was my supervisor the last 14 years?
Mr. Neal, I don't know who signed off on your time.
Exactly, that's my point. Thank you. Number two, who's in charge of my benefits? Is it the city of Akron or the board?
That's what I'm getting at.
I believe it's the city.
That's my whole point.
I understand the point, but I understand what it says in the charter.
I think we probably should refer back. I was listening last week when Mayor-elect Malik said that we need to talk to the creators that wrote this again so they can explain to the board what they meant. The reason I'm assigned to this board is so that I could be independent. For the last 3 years, I've been held back by the city and the administration not to be able to do my job. That's why this was created, so that I can go out and do my job.
May I say?
Please.
I do not feel that the language within the charter is to create an adversarial relationship between the board and Mr. Young. I think it's about helping, and I think he has been transparent, and I believe that he has more than done his job, and I think that we will be working together as opposed to against one another. But as the charter reads, we are over. And that's not saying that, Mr. Young, we have a whip and we're gonna find a way to make your position extremely uncomfortable. That's not what it's gonna be about.
I agree.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think that many of us have served on both public and especially not-for-profit boards. And thinking about it, Ms. Richards, I mean, you are the executive director of the Regional Easter Seals, yes?
Yes.
So that's roughly comparable to what the position of Mr. Young holds. So, I mean, in general, my experience has been that the chairs of boards have typically been the representative of the board that immediately is supervising, if that's the word, the director, or the lead staff person. Is that how you're?
Yes, that's,
Would that be appropriate as a model for how we should function?
I think it can be, I just feel angst in doing this correctly and providing Mr. Young the support that he needs, and us doing what we need to do in the confines of, he is a city employee. And I think we can, I don't want to get ourselves in trouble of not doing things the correct way. And I do think it's, especially at the beginning, is going to be time intensive to make sure that we're doing this the right way. And so my thought is it may be beyond a volunteer position at this point, whether it's Mr. Boyd or any of us, especially since we're so new to it. When I joined Easter Seals, my board had been in existence for almost 100 years, and they had a really good understanding of all our programs and services, and they knew, you know, I had many tasks that were already laid out before me that they created, and that's not what we're doing here. It's quite the opposite. So I think it can be that way eventually. I'm really concerned that we do it the right way at the beginning. That's all.
I agree, and I also agree with Ms. Lewis that I always, you know, again, I'm making I statements. I consider Mr. Young working with us. I like to feel he's working with us and not necessarily for us as an employee of ours. I just feel uncomfortable with that, and I know what the charter says, and maybe down the road we can, you know, maybe talk to the framers of the charter and see what they had, what did they have in mind when they wrote that.
I don't think us looking to the legislative intent is going to absolve us from our obligation to have to make some decisions. The verbatim language of the charter reads, "The independent auditor shall be directed solely by the board, and the independent police auditor shall be the chief executive of the Office of Independent Police Auditor, and shall solely direct all other employees of the Office of Independent Police Auditor."
And may I
And
add?
it says directed.
Go ahead.
Doesn't say we're employed by.
Okay.
I think a plain language understanding of the term directed would be is that we are providing guidance and that he is under our direction. And I think that it's...
I think a part of why they wrote the language the way they did is so that the independent police auditor will not be co-opted by the police department. So we can look at it like that. I believe that was the intent. I mean, it's almost like, we talk about intent, it's almost like the writers of the Declaration of Independence. What did they mean, you know, okay, so when we, to me, in the spirit of why they wrote it and how they wrote it was to ensure his independence and to make sure we remain independent and not co-opted or become a paper tiger, that kind of thing. And so I think that, once again, working with him, we're gonna have our challenges, yes, but I think working with him and providing oversight is not gonna be something that is going to be adversarial. We'll have some glitches, we'll have some things that we have to iron out, but I believe that, to me, in the spirit of what we're doing, he's on board because he's investigating and he is transparent. We want transparency, he wants accountability, so do we. So at the end of the day, that's what the charter says, that's what we have to do.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And to add, I think the intent was also to provide for some flexibility for us to figure things out along the way, as we're doing now. Phil, if you could you provide us a list of decisions or updates or just pieces, action items in which you need to receive guidance on your day-to-day basis, to which you just haven't had? I think from there we can work backwards and we can say, okay, these are items to which should be directed and how they should be answered to. And I mean, I see this as a high-level position. And on similar boards, your executive director is not being managed by their board on their day-to-day, everything that they're doing. And so I think that we have trust in you. And also, this conversation is not to provide any reflection on the job that you've been doing. The way I see it, you've been killing it. And you've been killing it without having much support. And so I appreciate you. And I don't want the tone of this conversation to be taken anything less than that. But I think that we have to have trust that Phil is going to be able to operate. But we also need you to provide us some guidance in terms of areas where you could use a little bit more direction. What are some of the things that you have needed to report up and out that you haven't had a person to? Because that will then allow us to understand how we can better support you moving forward. And so I think that would be helpful and would provide a framework for us to then figure out how we assign the various tasks.
First of all, you heard Gert Wims say for the last 14 years, there was nobody that supervised me. I had to go to training. I paid for training myself sometimes and learn all these things by myself. I am the longest running director of one agency in the United States. There's nobody in the United States that's directed one agency longer than me in the United States. So I don't need direction, I need help. I need people that I can go to and support some things, look into some things, give me some ideas on what their opinions are on whether or not we're going down the right direction. We're talking about all these things right now. And you know what I'd like to be doing? I'd like to be writing some policy and procedures on how BCI is going to investigate the new cases. We need to put some things in there that stop what was happening before BCI was there, who was in that crime scene and why. There are some things right now that are very, very important that we should be looking into. And as I said, I don't know about direction, but help is what I need, and a support group that can even say, no, we don't want to go that way. Yes, that's a good idea. But what you're asking is something that you should have asked me 16 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Young. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming from when I say I see us working with, at least for now in the beginning, working with him.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's saying that we're not working with him. Appreciate your comments, Mr. Young, also Mr. Costa, Ms. Lewis, Ms. Richards. Anything else you have for your report?
I do think very practically we have to decide who's going to sign off on his time. That's a very practical thing we need to get done. And Mr. Young, I meant no offense towards you. I'm trying to figure out how, exactly what you worded it very well. How do we help? How do we give direction into what we think is important, what you bring to us? I just want to figure out those parameters and those lines. I don't know that this is a human resource issue, but I'm going to bring it up, is our involvement with individual citizens. I just want to make sure that if an individual citizen comes to us, as we are public figures and our names are out there, that we are clear in listening and then making sure that they avail themselves to the procedures that are already there. If someone wants to pull us aside and complain about something, that we direct them to the different ways that they can file an official complaint, and that we need to support the process that's currently in place. I want us to be accessible, but I also want us to support the process. I think it's very important that people follow the processes, and then we do our part in whether that's reviewing or a different investigation or whatever. But I just think it's important that we will run into people who want to speak to us, and I think that's fine, but I think we just need to be clear about what our responses are appropriate.
That's a very good statement, because we have a citizen that has called me several times. She's talked to the chair as well, and she actually called me last week, and she wanted to talk to the deputy chair. And I've spent a lot of time giving the deputy chair all her information, basically what she was interested in, what she was going to be dealing with, and so that she didn't get a surprise. So I would say if that happens, please call me. In 16 years, I've talked to all kinds of people. Some swear, some don't swear. You know, we have to get used to that. I mean, basically, I would like for our police department not to swear at anybody unless they are being sworn at. But, you know, this is part of this job. People swear, and when they're upset, they're going to swear. And I don't know if the deputy chair has talked to her yet, but we've had several conversations. I think I passed on all her information, and I've told her what to expect when you talk to this person. So if you have someone, any of the board members, and you don't know how to address this, just call me, and I'll talk you through it and let you know what you can say and what you shouldn't say.
Ms.
You'll
Young,
know-
I think though, and I appreciate your comments, I think the point that's trying to be made is, is how we direct people to be able to make a comment in an appropriate way. And it's not just simply,
You mean a public comment like tonight?
no, not even a public comment, but if they have a complaint, and that's what Ms. Richards was talking about, if they have a complaint, instead of trying to pull a board member aside to make the complaint, how do we direct them to make the complaint that they need to make?
Well, I think
And
that board
that's
member
where
needs to-
she was asking about.
Your names are out there now. So
Absolutely.
If we get a complaint, you have to talk to people. Find out if it's a legitimate complaint.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's not, just direct them to me.
I don't think she's saying that we don't talk to them. We can talk to them, but it's the procedure in which we want to direct people so that their complaint is really getting met and needed. That's what Ms. Richards is saying.
May I interject, you guys, please? I did speak with that woman today, that citizen today. I did speak with her. She's perfectly satisfied now after we spoke. She even apologized for the last conversation she had with the board member. She apologized for cursing. She said she was just very upset and she has, you know, a mental health issue.
But Ms. Janiscavage, that's not the point of the conversation
No,
right now.
I understand, but I'm just saying,
But-
I directed her, I told her what the process was.
And Ms. Janiscavage, we appreciate that, but that's not the point on the table. And so we don't want to linger in those spaces.
I'm hearing. But
Thank you. Ms. Richards, you have any other?
No, that was it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I do have a question of Ms. Richards.
Yes.
Where are we with the hiring of an administrative assistant?
I've been in close contact with our representative, Ms. Doty, and there are a pool of 10 individuals that they are setting up basically Zoom screenings with. They will pick the top 5 and work with us to set up interviews for them with Mr. Young and the HR committee, whoever wants to attend that. So she does think it's going to be a 3 to 4 week process as we go through this. But she was waiting for us, after the last board meeting, she was waiting for us to give them the go-ahead to start that process. So I said, do it now, and that's where we're at.
And that 3 to 4 week process might be to hire someone. There still has to be a background, and the police department are doing backgrounds on officers, so we're going to get a back seat. It may take a month to get a background done.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Done? All right. Next committee will be community engagement. Ms. Lewis?
Our subcommittee members consist of myself as the chair, Caitlin Castle, Sean Peoples, and Tristan Thompson. Community Engagement Subcommittee will give citizens and stakeholders in the community a chance to participate in and influence the administrative task and decision-making of the Citizens Police Oversight Board. And our purpose is the Community Engagement Subcommittee will serve to promote the mission of the Citizens Police Oversight Board and be the communications bridge between the community and the board. And our objectives are as follows: create and find and attend network, partner, and community building opportunities. Create a database of community stakeholders and contacts, like nonprofits, churches, agencies, organizations, schools, and community development corporations. We are also going to create a step-by-step handbill or a two-sided glossy card that will highlight the 4 ways in which citizens can make a complaint to the police department through the independent police auditor's office, and provide a link provided we have a website to be able to do that. And then offer, I believe we said, this is an addition, obtain from the community concerns with regard to policing in Akron. Our membership, the Citizens Police Oversight Board Community Engagement Subcommittee will consist of at least 3 members who are appointed by the Citizens Oversight Board for their expertise, experience, and knowledge in community outreach, and shall serve for a term of 2 years, and members may be reappointed. And then our meetings, right now, because we're new, we want to be able to meet at least every other week, and then thereafter quarterly. And that's pretty much it.
Ms. Lewis, will you be able to send us what you just read off?
Yes,
All right, awesome.
I will do that.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Any other? Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Anybody have any questions or comments for Ms. Lewis? When we get that, we'll make a motion and move that into vote and accepting with what Ms. Lewis just read as far as the purpose of our community engagement.
Can I make a point too?
Please.
So our, when we're talking about networking, our initial networking piece is going to be, and I'll give you these flyers, but on May 27th, there is going to be a Arts Expo, and we'll have an opportunity, I'm sorry I don't have all of these, but we'll have an opportunity to introduce ourselves to the community and let them know what we're doing. And then the second networking opportunity is going to be something called Incognito, and this is a play written by Dominic Dunson, and it talks about the interaction that African Americans, particularly African American males, have with police officers. And the person that's going to lead this conversation is our own acting chair there, Kemp Boyd, and that's going to be July the 1st. So I'll provide more information for you there. It's going to be July 1st at 7 p.m. at, I believe, E.J. Thomas. And I'll provide a copy of that as well. And then finally, what we're going to do is a meet and greet and eat, and that will be scheduled for July. And that's going to give community members an opportunity to come and share their stories. And also, we're going to have a guest poet to talk about their experience with this whole thing. Okay?
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. If you have any questions, comments for Ms. Lewis?
Ms. Lewis, if you have a couple of minutes at the end of our meeting, hopefully it's not going to be much longer, I have an outreach program I'd like to present you with.
Sure.
I was going to make the recommendation that the Community Engagement Subcommittee adopt a engagement calendar, but it sounds as if y'all have already undertaken that. So hats off to y'all for thinking about ways to get actually into the community and to have substantive conversations about what's going on. Good work.
Sure.
Ms. Lewis, I'll talk about this a little bit in the new business, but also if you have anything that you wanted to express to, also with Stephanie Marsh, And as far as our page, they're getting a new website. And so we'll actually have a page, but if there's anything currently that you want to be on our link, our page right now currently as an oversight, all you have to do is reach out to Stephanie and she can get that put on there for you.
All right.
Okay.
Sound good, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Lewis. We'll move forward with our Budget and Finance Subcommittee. Mr. Costa.
All right, thank you, everybody. So as Mr. Giplin alluded to earlier, we are going to be meeting next on this upcoming Tuesday, which is, I believe, May 23rd at 5 p.m., either at North, or we're eyeing for either North Library or Maple Hill, depending on whichever we're able to book. So we'll.
Or somewhere else. I had tried those before we went to Ellett, so, but I'm going to try Maple Valley, then North, and then catch as catch can, okay?
Okay.
Don't
So-
forget about Compass.
Oh, no, we love Compass Cafe. Okay, thank you for the recommendation. Love the folks over there, and the Well and all the good work that they do. So that'll be our next meeting. We were not able to meet this week, just kind of due to timing. But the focus moving forward of our next meeting is really going to be authorizations for spending. I'd like, if possible, to have a conversation with Ms. Richards to kind of ensure that we're tackling and we're discussing all the authorizations internally. I'd like to bring forward a list of internal, both workday authorizations, but all authorizations as relates to budget and finance, and bring a series of recommendations to the subcommittee for us to discuss and then bring forward to the board in terms of almost just a series of procedures for how the authorization of funds will work, and for us to have a discussion. So that will be the really the purpose and the core function of that meeting and having that discussion. I was gonna say that's pretty much about it in terms of where we're at right now.
Any questions or comments for Mrs. Costa? All right. Thank you, Mrs. Costa, for your report. The one item on new business is simply our conversation myself and Ms. Castle had with Stephanie Marsh and her team from the city regarding just our page on the website. The city will be getting a new website, I think, in July. And so the functionality of it will be much better than what it is now. But currently, we do have a page on the current website, and so we're out there. So anything that anybody wants to put on our website, any updates, or on our page, please, 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 let's reach out to Stephanie Marsh so we can utilize that effectively. We can put up there as well our subcommittee meetings and dates and times and locations so that the public is aware of it, as well as sending out those notices. Okay?
Do we know when we're going to be able to get cards, business cards? Because that's one of the things that we definitely need as we network, even if it's just our name and who we are and an email.
Will we have to, Miss Williams, will we have to, is that more of talking to HR? Who would we talk to about business cards for the board?
Let me see, because I don't know exactly who we'll talk to for you, and make sure that the expenditure goes through yours.
Yep.
Let me find out, and we
Okay.
definitely get back to you.
Thank you so much.
Just if somebody could give me maybe a mock-up of what information you would like on your cards, so then I can get a true billing idea of what you need, how many cards you need, the information you'd like on them.
Okay.
So a part of your conversation that you had with Ms. Castle and Ms. Marsh, a logo. We don't have a logo, so we would need a logo.
Yeah, we would probably want to create a logo before we get a card made. And so,
Because we're thinking about branding and marketing and our footprint apart from the city, so we would definitely have to look at that. I didn't know, when you had the last meeting, do you have an artist in mind? Or? Good, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I think we have a couple people, we can get some sketches done. I think we would probably, if you don't mind, if there's, Ms. Lewis, I'd love to have you a part of that process, and anybody else that may want to be a part of looking at what can a logo mean based on the charter and the essence of what it is that we want to help to move and drive, so absolutely.
Mission statement, tagline at the bottom of that card.
Okay.
Would you like to get cards before getting the logo, or I'd imagine there's going to be a process of coming up with a logo, and so I'm just wondering, would it be helpful to just have something now, almost just like a Vista print card that you give to somebody, or would there be a preference to get, I guess, the whole?
I think so.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I'd imagine
A temporary, we need something. Need something.
Okay, so we'll work on getting a temporary card and also work on from a branding perspective.
I can help to push along the cards. I'll take that on.
Thank you, Mr. Costa. Any other questions or comments?
Last week and this week, I think I've received 4 calls so far about the National March for Jalen Walker on May 24th. Does anybody else know anything about this National March? There's supposedly 2,000 people or groups involved in this march.
Where did you hear that from?
I know it's
Citizens
been
have
promoted.
been coming in.
It's been promoted by the Akron Urban League and local groups as well, too.
Have you heard about it?
I have. That's been seen through
I didn't
social
hear
media
about-
posts.
Is this
I didn't hear about the
something,
number,
because
that number.
I want to talk to the chief to find out what is in store for 2,000 marchers for this, whether or not we don't need any more of these protests that, the protesters are wrong, the police are wrong. We've got to find a way that, this doesn't look like this. The world is watching Akron, Ohio, and we can't keep going out doing what we're doing. There has to be some rhyme to the reason. I talked to the chief last week about different things. I was getting calls that protesters were saying that they were being made to jump through hoops to file complaints, and I talked to the chief about that, and he said, no, the process had not changed. People were sending me emails, but then they were told that they needed to come to the police station to fill out a formal complaint form, and that has not been the process over the last 7 or 8 years. Something else that I'm checking into, and I talked to the deputy chief about it, we have a complaint form online that you can download, but apparently you can't fill it out and then send it back in, and we've got to get that fixed.
Yeah, that was brought up in our conversation with Ms. March. She was definitely aware of it, and she is looking into how we can do that more efficiently, because that was brought up by myself and Ms. Castle as well.
And just another observation, looking at our webpage as it is now, there is the option, or at least there's a link to that non-fillable PDF complaint form on our webpage that's been created, but it's a little hidden. I don't know if anybody has looked at the webpage, but you have to go down the bottom, and it's hyperlinked, and it just says click here. So I think that we should probably make a request to make it stand out a little bit more. And I think we just got to get a better understanding of what functionalities internally would prohibit the city, if anything, from having a fillable PDF, because I think that's one of the easier things that we could get done. So thank you for pushing that again.
Anything else out of anybody? Anything else? Questions, comments?
Mr. Young, I would like to invite you to our next HR subcommittee. If you could come prepared to discuss your list of areas you need help, I think that would be a great way to start this process. And I don't know when that is yet. we have trouble scheduling, but I think that would be an excellent use of our time in our HR committee.
All right, if it be nothing else, Do I have a motion to adjourn?
No, hold on a second. Are we in new business still?
Yes.
I had a new business.
It wasn't on the agenda.
I emailed Caitlin twice about it. Okay, well, I don't know why she didn't put it on there. I emailed her this afternoon also.
Go ahead.
But she's traveling. But anyway, okay, so it's about Workday. And I had gotten a couple emails about, and since Gert is here, maybe she can shine some light on this. But last week, I had had a correspondence with Stacy Doty about how to put our time into Workday. And she responded saying that we won't be permitted to put our own time into Workday, that an attendance sheet will be forwarded to, I guess, HR, and Gert will manage that, will put the time in there. So basically, we know what meetings we're attending, but we're not apparently being permitted to put our own time in. So I said, okay. But then I get another email yesterday asking who's going to, informing us that Mr. Young's time off last week had been approved, and who on the board is going to be doing that from now on, approving his time off. And the response was that would be me, which I didn't know anything about that. I found out about it when I opened up my email. So I guess my issue is, it seems like this is trying to be handled, someone's trying to have this both ways. You know, either if we're not trusted enough or whatever the issue is to put our own time in, why is it that I'm being designated to go in and approve other board members, including Mr. Young's time, but we can't do our own time? I just don't see us having it both ways that way. You know, either we're allowed to put our own time in and have it approved by a board member, or we are not. I hope I'm being clear enough about what I'm saying. So I'm being asked to approve his time off, or any other, I guess, time that he takes or whatever. I'm being asked to approve that or any other board member's time, but we're not allowed to put our own time in. I'm confused.
Is that, could you bring some clarity, please?
Sure. All the boards and commissions get paid the city of Akron. They provide through their minutes, meeting minutes, to the HR department, their attendance. HR enters that, and that creates the payment for your attendance at the meeting. So that's following our normal procedures. All our boards and commissions that get paid are set up as such. Phil Young is your independent employee. So if you are not comfortable signing off on Phil's time, I just need to know who that is, because I want to honor the charter, and this board has oversight of that employee. So I'm just looking for some guidance on who Phil ultimately should be reporting to in Workday.
I'm not finished. But if we're independent, why can't we independently put our own time in Workday?
And so going back to the point about Mr. Young, between you and I as the chair and the vice chair, he reports essentially when something's going on to us. That's why in the email I'd said, if you can't get to me, then it's you. And so we're going to get the information of why we can't put it in ourselves. Ms. Williams, if you could send our vice chair, myself, an email about that, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, but she directed me to talk to you about that. Okay, thank you.
Yes, it will be myself and the vice chair, Ms. Anaskevich.
So, but that also includes us putting our own time in?
So you're finding out the information for the latter. Thank you. Any other new business?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I do want to finish an earlier point, because I don't think, we're a board, and you have always said yourself that it's healthy when we agree to disagree. I don't think any of us want to be or appreciate being cut off when we're trying to make a point, and the only point I was trying to make in response to Ms. Richards is that I did speak with that young lady, and I explained that there's a process, and she accepted that. That's all I was trying to say before I was cut off, that she accepted the process, and she said she would be watching us, and she appreciated the call.
Thank you. Any other new business? Even though that wasn't new business. Move to adjourn, anybody? Sure. Second. Anaskevich?
Yes.
Gippin?
Yes.
Peoples?
Yes.
Lewis?
Yes.
Richards?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
Boyd?
Everyone have a good evening.